Okay, well, good morning, everyone. This is Sridhar Ramanathan here with Aventi Group. I'm our co-founder, and I am so happy today and thrilled to have two fantastic folks on the line. One is Robbie Helford. Robbie is a Director of Sales Enablement and Commercialization at Malwarebytes. Now, Malwarebytes, many of you know, is a fantastic consumer security software product. What you may not realize is they have a very vibrant and growing enterprise software business, security software business. So today, I'm very happy to have you on the line. Welcome, Robbie.
Thank you.
And we also have Sasha Mustafi Jorgensen. She is an Aventi partner, also very skilled, specialized in demand generation and anything to do with feeding sales, qualified leads, and things of that nature. And so thank you, everybody, for joining. This is another Aventi Live session. Today, we're going to focus on how to create urgency for the sales team for both prospects as well as your current customers, install-based customers. So kind of two buckets there. And let's go ahead and get started. And perhaps I can just start off with one of the areas with regards to urgency is roadblocks that the sales marketing team often encounter with regards to the sales cycle. And maybe we can just start off there with Sasha with what are some of the roadblocks, things that we can do on the marketing side to smoothen the sales process? How can we help in this process?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sridhar. The eliminating roadblocks doesn't create a sense of urgency, obviously, but it does help with equipping sales with what it needs to close an opportunity faster. So some of the things that come to mind are, for example, an elevator. It's an elevator pitch, which helps sales be able to position the product or technology pretty quickly. But also things like competitive intelligence. When I was a sales engineer, I know that going into an opportunity and understanding your competitor very well is instrumental in getting the technical win. And so it's very helpful to provide battle cards to sales to equip them with the information they need as they go in. And then there's objection handling. For example, things, if any objections come up during the sales process that has to do with the company or the technology, it's good for sales to have a quick comeback. And finally, case studies are things that matter a lot. In marketing, they're very helpful, but also in sales, because sales can hand them off as a way to prove that the technology works. So essentially, again, it doesn't help increase urgency, but it's a proactive approach to eliminating roadblocks to help sales win.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Sasha.
I said, Robbie, what are your thoughts?
Well, I really agree with everything that Sasha's building, because it does create a sense of urgency because it helps with deal velocity. Part of this is getting all this wonderful goodness from our product marketing partners and our marketing teams. But for us on the enablement side is to organize it in a way that is very prescriptive for our sellers and easy to find. So as they're learning about these objections, or as they're trying to get ready for the competitive battle card, they need to know where to find it and where to find it easily. But we also need to work as a team. Instead of it just being thrown over the fence, there is no fence. We're all on the same side of it. And so feeding the information back to Sasha and her team and saying, hey, this particular battle card is being used quite frequently. Let's stay on top of this particular competitor because we're seeing them a lot in deals. But giving them analytics and helping them understand, help them prioritize what is the best pieces of content in the moment to help our sellers increase that deal velocity and build that sense of urgency. So I think that these, between sales enablement and product marketing in particular, we work hand in hand on this. And so it's really important that we're collaborating, but we're also working back and forth and giving analytics back to each other, what's working and what's not.
Such a great comment there, Robbie, about that partnership between product marketing, sales enablement, and the two really do come together when it comes to that sales process, the buyer's journey. And then, Sasha, I know you often talk about this idea of riding the wave, and that kind of speaks to both content as well as this partnership between sales enablement, product marketing. Can you talk more about this idea of riding the wave? Where does that fit in creating some?
So the point of that is to understand what's really going on in the market so that you can react to it quickly and pivot quickly. So, for example, I've worked at many cybersecurity firms or with several cybersecurity firms, and some do this better than others. But if there's something happening in the market, for example, a data breach or a DDoS attack, they have subject matter experts that jump on it pretty quickly. They do a blog post, very educational, not to pitch the product, but to talk about the issue within the market. And then we can take that in marketing and send emails out to the database, to prospects, as well as our customers. And we can also do things like a product webinars, or actually a webinar where we talk about the data breach, and basically a very educational one. But these can be quite successful because you can have people, prospects and customers jump on it, and they could be very useful for upsell, as well as for sales to contact them and see if there's any interest. There's also the, for example, the other thought process, the other thing that, for example, think about is the COVID-19, right? What's happening now? A lot of companies are messaging for that, but it's good to look at your technology as well and see if there are things that there are technologies that maybe you haven't been pushing as much, but fit well within the market now. For example, maybe something like a product that might manage online traffic. So that's something that you might want to pivot to talk about a little bit more. So again, it's not that these activities are creating an urgency, but there's an urgency in the market that you're reacting to.
Such a good point. Creating urgency based on what's hot in the market, and in terms of content that's relevant and timely. Further thoughts about that, Robbie?
Yeah, at Malwarebytes, we actually have a rapid response team that we put together anytime, because we are in cybersecurity. Anytime something does happen like that, it's a major breach, such as the Marriott one that happened last year, we're able to really jump into that very quickly and be able to do what we need to do to get Sasha the information that she needs in order for her to develop the content they need to, and pulling together our experts. So we totally prescribe to that stream of thought. But then being able to get that back to sellers in a way that's consumable is really, really important for everyone, because those are the people who are going to be on the phones, they're going to be sending out the emails, and really reaching out to their existing and prospects that are currently in the pipeline.
And just on that topic, are there, so I know this is a little bit off topic, but what are things we shouldn't be doing? Because, for example, COVID-19, sensitive topic, I do see some vendors, marketing and messaging and then salespeople, it's actually backfiring, meaning it's not, they're clearly coming across as opportunistic. Are there any kind of tools, tips around messaging that is timely, is appropriate, and does help things? I love your example, Robbie, with regards to that outbreak. Any other?
Don't be an ambulance chaser. You know, the minute that you sound desperate or that you're trying to be opportunistic about a pain, you know, it's that lack of empathy that comes across. And I think when people are like, "Hey, you got a data breach, we could have helped you solve that," that's not helping the problem. That's not coming in with that empathy that we really need to lead with. So, like from Sasha's perspective, you know, thinking about how do we teach our sellers to be empathetic about the situation and be there saying, "Hey, you're not alone." And you using Brene Brown's talk, hey, you're not alone. We know what it's like to be down here like this. Instead of, it stinks that you got breached.
Yeah, absolutely right, Robbie. Those are very good points. We don't want to be opportunistic, so we got to add value, right? Whatever we're offering. That's why I'm always emphasizing being educational versus trying to sell what you have, because in that way you're actually being helpful versus trying to position your product. And it's not about us as much as it is about them.
Yeah, so let's pick up on that, Sasha. I like how you're focusing on the customer situation and what is helpful, truly helpful to them, and then Robbie's emphasizing empathy. So what are some of the tactics that consider those factors, empathy, relevant content? Perhaps I can have you, Sasha, lead off with tactics that you know that are really working to move things through the funnel faster, perhaps.
So I think content is, of course, very important to help move the buyers through the funnel. And again, I'm big on educational content versus selling your products and doing product pitches. But you can have, you know, as you nurture people through their buyer journey, making sure that they have access to new content as they're going through that journey. So whether they're coming onto the website and there might be, as they're reading something, other things pop up that say, hey, there's more content that you can read, and then keep pushing them through that journey, which helps them become warmer leads as far as marketing is concerned, and therefore you can hand them off to sales faster. But at the same time, they're getting educated and they're learning more as they're going through the funnel. So that's part of it. The other part is to just push the prospect faster to the funnel. I think your messaging is very important, as we talked about, but also tactical things like CTA buttons and where you put them, right? Call to action buttons across the site, on advertising, or even emails that you might send out. So these are things to think about: how you're positioning, how you're messaging, how your CTA buttons are, and how you're providing content to people. So these are some of the things to think about.
Very good. What else there, Robbie, works with regards to
tech? Well, aligning your selling journey to the buying journey is really critical, and being very open about and flexible in this time, right? Where a deal might have taken 2 to 3 weeks in the past, it might take 4 to 6 weeks now, because of COVID, because of how long they don't have the time to get in the room together and make a decision. So, building those strong mutual action plans and getting buyers to agree of what actions they're willing to take. Helps build that urgency too, but also just reverse engineering your deals. And when asking the questions of the buyer, if you were in an ideal state, when would you like to have this in your hands, or when would you like to go live? And then reverse engineering the steps that both the buyer and the seller need to complete in order for them to get to that point. And then so that helps build that sense of urgency as well. But just as Sasha mentioned on the customer buying journey perspective of being able to build suggested content, you also need to do that on the buyer side too, by giving prescriptive content. So if they're starting with a piece of content, having a tool or system like a HighSpot or a content management system that allows them to understand what's related to that piece of content. So maybe they sent that piece of content that the product marketing suggested, but it didn't quite stick, it didn't get a response. What are the other pieces are trailed to that piece of content that we could suggest they would send it? It might provoke a response from the buyer as well, or assist the seller in that same line of messaging. So being very thoughtful about how we structure and how we line up our content is really important from a sense of urgency as well.
Remarkable, Robbie, to have you talk about content management systems like HighSpot, and there are other ones out there. And a lot of what product marketing does is produce content, but there's more to the buying process than strictly content. For example, coming back to Sasha's comment around CTAs, call to action on the website, another one we hear a lot about is software trials. Because buyers, and as they go through their journey, they're in this research phase. At some point, they want to get their hands on it and try it out. What do you both think about the importance of trials, software trials, and maybe promos in kind of getting closer to the bottom of the funnel? What really works on trials?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Sridhar. Trials are incredibly important, and they should be optimized because a person who's downloading a trial, they could be in research mode, but if they're actually they're interested in buying, they're really looking at your product. And at that point, it's good for sales to be able to contact them. But they should have the journey of the trial should be optimized and very as smooth as possible. So from the time they sign up to the time they go through nurture journey and the end of the trial, they should have a good experience. And if they run into any technology problems, they're immediately helped out. So somebody's there to help them along the way. And then they're contacted immediately afterwards or throughout the process.
Right.
So that people don't just end a trial and then they're forgotten, right? So it can be very helpful in helping sales close opportunities if it's done right.
If it's done right, there's the key right there.
Yeah, and part of doing that correctly is once you do have a trial, which is a very hot lead, and that's a very valuable lead that you have in your hand, of establishing what they're hoping to get out of the trial. So establishing trial criteria. Be very clear about at the end of this trial, what are they hoping to see? Because at the end of the trial, just like Sasha said, we're not going to just leave them to be. We're going to set up a scheduled time. So remember, a trial is a very valuable asset in a tool in a seller's handbag. That's a big value item. We want to make sure we're getting something in return for that as well. So whether it's access to the decision maker, whether it's another meeting at the end of the trial to evaluate, whatever that might be, don't treat your trials as a low value activity. It's a very, very high value activity. And depending on what industry you're in and what your solution does, you need to be careful about how you give out your trials, because in our world, if we give a trial to the wrong person, it could actually solve the problem that we're trying to help them solve and be able to charge for, by giving them the trial for free, and then they actually go dark on us because we solved their problem within the trial. So you have to be very careful about that depending on what type of product you're offering, but you want to have that clear entrance of like, what does success look like, and being able to get access at the end of it to sit down and schedule and review what that trial was, and if you were able to achieve those criteria that you set up. Because then, just going back to driving that urgency question, we can go back and say, hey, you said you want to be able to do these 4 things. We're able to prove that we can do those 4 things. Let's talk about what our next steps are for you to purchase. If you don't have that, you don't have that leverage or that sense of urgency to drive that forward.
Excellent comment there, Robbie. Thank you for sharing that, especially comments with regards to having success criteria right up front, and then also knowing who the motivation of that trialist, the person doing the trial. We actually have a service at Aventi called the Aventi Trial Optimization. Sorry, put a little plug in there. But what we learned in doing this for several clients of ours is that there are very different motivations for someone to sign up for a trial. And yes, it creates urgency for those who are really evaluating. Some of them are just doing trial because they want to see what's out there. They want to experience, in the case of Malwarebytes, they want to try endpoint protection, for example. So knowing the motivation really helps, and structuring the process for the different kinds of motivations. So thank you for the comment you made there, Robbie, about success criteria. Sasha made a comment about not letting someone just go dark and never be touched. We see that too. Some clients of ours, there's a trial sign up and then nothing from the vendor who should be helping them in the journey. And
that's such a high value lead. And so we want to make sure we treat them that way too.
Right on. Let's shift our energy now to from prospects over to install-based customers, because obviously a lot of the sales and marketing activities are intended to expand your presence, your revenue within current accounts. What are some of the things, maybe we can start with you there, Robbie, on current accounts? What tactics, things we can do to move things along faster with those?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about eating what's on your plate. We don't, it's a lot cheaper to retain a customer than it is to go out and find a new one. And so the things that Sasha mentioned, even with the trial, of just the touch points of reaching out to your customer, whether you're in the renewal situation or a customer success situation or an account manager role, those little touch points of just reaching out to a customer and making sure they're okay. Looking at your data, are they fully deployed? Are they 10% deployed? If they're 10% deployed and you're 6 months into their agreement, you probably have a problem that's going to happen in 6 months because they haven't realized the value that you promised them when you purchased the product. So we're looking for things like that, of where are those little pockets that we can help people and add value continually after the sale as well. Because the more that we can build that trust and that validity, it's a lot easier to ask for the business later on at the renewal perspective. But then there's also opportunities for them once we've built that relationship. If we have a new product that's a better fit for them, or we have a new product that's going to enhance our relationship, it's a lot easier to ask for that business if you have a relationship versus selling a product, not talking to the customer, going dark on them, and then a year later going, oh, by the way, you're going to pay 15% more. And, oh, but we have another product. You want to buy that? There's no trust built there. Whereas I could reach out and say, hey, Joe, we've been talking all 6 months. We've got this new product coming out in a couple of weeks. Would you like to maybe be a beta customer? Would you like to try it? There's a better relationship there. And I think Salesforce does a great job of making that customer for life idea. You have to have that mentality. And it's not just, little things. It's lots of little things of like a little thank you note after the purchase. Those little personal touches, especially if we're not going back to the office until 2021, how can we help these individual people who are making the decision to buy our products feel more loyal to us and increase that relationship as they get more comfortable with the product and ourselves as well.
That's a good point on a relationship being so important even more at that stage. Sasha, anything else to add to commentary around install-based customer?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are very good points, Ravi. From a marketing perspective, I think it's important to take a proactive approach when we're dealing with customers, especially from the product marketing side. So one of the things that from a very tactical perspective is helpful to do is to keep your customers up to speed and updated on the products and any new capabilities that come out and the benefits of those capabilities. So product launch webinars are very helpful, especially if there's a launch going on. Sometimes what I see is there's a product launch, there's a press release, and a couple of data sheets get updated, and then it's forgotten about it. There's a lot more that can be done to get that information out there. And even if you don't have a launch, you can do a series of video series, education notes about the product itself, webinars, etc., to keep engaging them. But from a more proactive kind of long-term approach, it's really good to keep your customers engaged. So if you have the resources and the budget, it's good to do things like user group conferences, keep the users coming back, talking to each other, networking, and that creates loyalty and customer satisfaction. And they'll probably come back for more. And then there's also leadership councils. Some companies do this very effectively, where they invite the VIPs, those accounts, however they by whatever criteria they decide who these customers are, whether it's the licensing or the size of the company. They invite them back, and they have once a year discussions about the roadmap of the product. And so it can be very helpful in keeping those customers engaged, and makes it easier for sales, because if they're really engaged, they're more willing to buy. And then, of course, if you get out of marketing and sales, there's professional services and support. And especially when it gets to support, as Robbie was mentioning, it's so important to continually keep helping those, keep them satisfied. If there's any trouble, any issues with the product, to immediately deal with it, so that they're satisfied, and it'll make sales job easier.
Yeah, right on. I want to just pick up on the word you use about engagement, because that is so important, and we're all ultimately trying to engage with buyers in a way that they like and find respectful. And you also talked about, Sasha, about user groups and leadership councils. So in this current climate, a lot of physical events like that, where you would have direct engagement, physical engagement with prospects and customers, that's obviously gone to the wayside, and people are moving to virtual. And I'm curious, Robbie, maybe turn to you first. How can we use virtual events, field marketing events, customer events in a virtual setting? What are some things that are really working there to drive some better engagement and move things through the funnel faster?
I think we're still playing with that as from a selling perspective of what really is working. When we first started this pandemic, we thought 4 or 5 by now we'd be back in the offices and life would be back to normal. And the reality is that's not going to be the case for a while. And so we're starting to toy with new ideas of how do we replicate a user conference experience. But we all know from a selling perspective that the business really isn't done in the booth. The business isn't really done in a session. It's really done in the social aspects. And so we're kind of focusing and trying to focus more on these social activities that we can use to engage our prospects and our customers together, whether it's I've seen ideas of like hosting poker nights virtually, doing cooking classes, sending them the kits to make martinis and doing virtual martini classes and things like that, where we can still have that collaborative social aspect to it. Because if you think about it, I mean, I know they're not as prevalent as it was at the beginning of the pandemic, but when March and April were rolling around, everybody was doing Zoom happy hours, right? Everybody was jumping on these Zoom happy hours because we still need that social interaction. I think our buyers still need some sort of social interaction, and our sellers need a way to be able to connect to people in a way that is still authentic, but is not in a pure PowerPoint presentation mode. And so we have to find ways that we can think creatively outside the box. It's going to get as close to that conversation at the bar, or conversation at the dinner party or dinner as we can possibly get.
I love those ideas. What do you think? There's a bunch of martini parties.
Sounds good.
Wow.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind having one right now.
Yeah, that's great. That's better than physical. What any other tactics that come to mind around creating urgency that we know is resonating and actually working for both sales and marketing folks? Promos, for example, things of that nature. By the way, this is a good time for our audience. If you are interested in asking a question, you can go ahead and put that. If you're using the Facebook app, you can just type in a comment there, and Jamie will call attention to that. So please be thinking about questions for both Sasha and Robbie, because they're both experts in their field. So yeah, any other tactics come to mind? I was thinking about promotions. Where does that fit? Is that getting passé or still being?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Robbie.
We're using promotions currently right now around the product launch. So we did it around our product launch. It was very successful. And we decided to go ahead and extend it into February or into this month, because we are seeing people, as we're going back to our install base and saying, hey, we've got this new product. Here's an opportunity for you to upgrade at a lower cost than we normally would. We're finding ways to engage our customers in a new way to drive some new revenue. So I don't think promotions are dead. I think if you think about them very smartly, one thing you might want to avoid, from a promotion perspective, is avoid doing 50% off promotions. Because especially if you're in a SaaS business, because remember, if you sell it at 50% off right now, that clawback at the beginning of the next renewal, it's going to be really, really hard to go from $25 a seat that you gave it to when it's normally 50 and going back and asking them for 45 or 50 the following year. You're essentially asking for that money back the second year. Think about the way you structure your promotions, where you're not putting your renewals team in the hole from the very beginning. So I think they're really effective and a way to drive in business and get people interested. You just need to be very careful about how you structure them.
Absolutely. The other thing that the promotions are good. Free assessments could be very helpful. Time-limited free assessments. As well, a company that I'm working with actually did shelter at home kits. We sent out via email, etc. We did an email campaign for that, and we got a lot of downloads. So these are not sales-ready leads, obviously, but at least it gets the conversation started. So it's good to kind of get creative, see what's happening in the market, based on that, come up with ideas. But also, I think doing things, even the trial, you can potentially, if you have a 30-day trial, you can reduce the number of days for that, if that makes sense for your product. And free assessment, you can put a time window for it so that it's a limited time. So there's a variety of things we can think of or do. Yeah.
We did a coloring book, actually, which was pretty cool.
Oh, there you go.
Nice.
Yeah, just something to add value. Even if it's a little bit off topic, it's just something that, remember, we're all humans sitting here today, and we're all struggling both academically, professionally, and personally of how do we manage where we are today in the world. And so majority of us have families at home and now have little kids running in our backgrounds, or have kids that are home and bored. Because school is going to be distant learning. So where are some ways maybe your business can add value if you have a product that could help a school or help a student maybe learn, for example, coding? I saw Google is putting out a new thing around coding classes for kids. It's complimentary. And I use complimentary versus free because complimentary has value, so making sure that we're always saying that everything that we're providing you has some sort of value.
Very creative. I love this coloring book. Did you say, Robbie, that's a Malwarebytes?
Yeah, so if you go to I believe our LinkedIn page, we have the coloring book that you can download for your small children. So my son Noah has been coloring, and he's got like little mazes and things on that. So our PR team put that together, which was really cool.
So thoughtful, very creative. Yeah, these are times where creativity can really help move things along in the funnel. I want to come back to a couple other topics, one of which you touched on early on, Robbie, with regards to content that people are creating, especially marketing team, battle cards, case studies, things of that nature. One of them that I know you've talked about is sales playbooks. In fact, I know you've advocated to, should we blow up sales playbooks? And a lot of times product marketing, they put a ton of time and effort into those things, hoping that'll speed up the sales cycle. What are your thoughts on sales playbooks, and how can they become an asset to move things faster through the process?
I am not a fan of playbooks. And I'm not a fan of playbooks because playbooks are static activity. The product marketing team spent an incredible amount of time in developing these things, and they turned into be 25, 30-page documents. Sellers just don't read them. And so it feels like it's a very expensive activity for an organization to put together. So what we look at is we still put together, even at Malwarebytes, we don't look at playbooks as a one document. We actually look at it in three, and within those three, we look at very, very small activities within them. So microlearning is a big piece of this. How can we help sellers find information, review information, and grab it very quickly? So, for example, a level 1 content for us is it's around prospecting. So that would be, the sales playbook is still there. It's just in different pieces and different elements. So prospecting is level 1. So understanding if I need to learn about how to go out and talk about the product, that's level 1. Level 2 is how to qualify and discover against that product. So once I've got somebody interested, how do I actually make sure they're the right fit for the organization, and how do I make sure that I ask the right questions? And the level 3 is how do you close a deal? So once you've got somebody who wants to purchase, what are the things that we need to do in order to do that? The nice thing about that is if you are selling with a partner or channel network is you can actually break those down, and if you're delivering them on demand, you can actually give those to your channel partners as well. You can pull out some information that you need that is internal only, but it allows you to really utilize that content even further amongst just your internal selling groups. And it's also much easier to update. So for example, if we do a pricing change, I just have to swap out that one piece of content without having to make everybody go back and reread the document or re-push out the document. So it just allows us to keep those documents very, very fluid and add that high value back to our sellers so they know exactly where to go if they want to look at that one piece of information.
Very good.
And I can also track the crap out of it. So make sure people actually read it and are ingesting it versus just putting a document into a box file or a drive file and just hoping that somebody reads it, or being able to see how many times somebody viewed it. We can actually analyze what's being used, how it's being used, and what do we need to continue to iterate on.
I see Sasha nodding her head around content tracking and who's using what. Have more comments on that one there, Sasha? I know
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Managing the content and tracking it is incredibly important. And as you look at the prospects through the journey and being able to kind of look at the click-through rates, see what's working and what's not working is incredibly important as well.
Mm-hmm.
And also from looking at what sales is downloading and what is useful for sales, right? So if they're essentially you provide battle cards and you see that the number of downloads, if you're using Salesforce, has gone up, then you know that perhaps the battle cards are being useful. Or if you create messaging, it's good to get feedback from sales. I usually like to work very closely with sales, being that I was a sales engineer myself. So I like to get feedback. They're on the ground, they're using the stuff you're creating, and they can tell you if it's working or not, and you can modify based on that.
And if it's big pieces of content, like say a new pitch deck or something like that, we actually try to get it in front of the reps ahead of time before we actually go live. So we have a rep council that we put through where I put somebody like Sasha and say, go pitch this, and then get feedback about where they see potential holes. Because as we know, we hope that the product marketing team builds this beautiful deck and not a seller's ever going to go off script or change any slide or anything on that. We're trying to get ahead of that. We're trying to save valuable cycles of having to go back and reiterate on a deck after it falls flat with sellers, trying to get those kind of worked out ahead of time. But then also getting analytics back to the product marketing team of like, hey, here's how many times it's been viewed. Hey, and also how many times it's been shared with the customer. So finding a tool that works best for you to manage that, which in my humble opinion is not Box or Drive or any of those. Those are content repositories, not content management systems. If you're going to invest in today in COVID, if you have some money to invest, investing in something like that will return tenfold, because as any product marketer who's out there in the field can probably empathize with getting an email from a sales leader saying you have to update this data sheet tomorrow because we need it, and then being able to do that because that's the request you're getting, but being able to go back and look at the analytics and going, yeah, Mr. VP, I totally empathize that you guys need this, but it's only been used twice in the last 2 quarters. Whereas this piece of content that you're completely ignoring is being used 95% of the time in every one of our sales cycles. So it just helps you build a better relationship. It becomes, instead of being a servant to the sales team, becoming a partner to the sellers as well. Just as what we are in enablement, we're not a servant to the sales team, we're a partner with the sales team to inform them to how to sell faster and more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, since you brought up content management systems, any plugs you want to make there, Robbie, on vendors you've worked with?
I mean, we currently use HighSpot where we are, but there are a lot of great vendors, Showpad, Seismic, even depending on your size of your business and what your needs are. Sales is another great one you could probably look at. But you're always looking at, is it going to interrupt or is it going to integrate with the seller's workflow? It doesn't matter which platform you pick, just making sure that it's not something additional or extra work for sellers, but it's going to fold nicely into what they're already doing.
Exactly. Yeah, and this goes back to our great opening comments around how do we make the process smooth for the sales rep, for the sellers, and introducing a system that's super disruptive isn't going to really help. So integrating with how they sell is the way to go.
Well, yeah, and it's adoption too. I mean, if faster we can get to it, just like our sellers are trying to, and our customer success and marketing is trying to get people to adopt our product as quickly as possible. from the internal side, if we make an investment, we have to work to get our product adopted as well. And as soon as it becomes part of the workflow, it becomes a no-brainer for sellers. They're like, oh yeah, I need to go look at it here. Versus, I don't know where to find the content, which is what happened when I first got here. Was content was scattered everywhere, and we pulled the content rodeo in, pulled everything back in, and we from an enablement perspective, working with product marketing, we have a very, very tight control over what gets to our sellers. So things don't fly through from field marketing or from product. Everything gets funneled through PMMs and myself and our IT team to make sure that the messaging is staying consistent, and that we're also measuring everything that's going out.
Beautiful.
I don't like surprises.
You mean surprises? Yeah, no one likes.
No surprises.
So interesting, Robbie, to hear you talk so much about content, which of course is critical, right, to the seller's success. Sasha, anything else on systems, content, tactics?
No, I think we covered it. I mean, that alignment is really important. And it is true that sales can get overwhelmed because and product marketing can get overwhelmed because you get this checklist, right, of requests that come in that I want a data sheet, I want a solution brief. And if I just had that, I could close the deals, right?
Right.
So product marketing gets reactive and is just constantly just trying to create content without thinking about it strategically because they get overwhelmed. And then sales gets overwhelmed because all this content and training is getting thrown at them. So that alignment is good. And somebody like Robbie is fantastic to have there because that way you know what needs to get handed off to sales and what makes sense and what doesn't. So it's good.
PMMs and enablement have to die together. So that's a big piece of wherever I am. First person I make friends with are my PMMs.
Right. Yeah.
I love it. Oh, Robbie, that's music to our ears.
All right. Yeah. Exactly. Be nice to your enablement and PMM people.
Best friends. Well, maybe we'll just close with one final thought, which is those of you who are on the call today, thank you so much for attending. I'd like to have Robbie and Sasha offer up something to try in the next 30 days, something you could just try out as an experiment. There's never one silver bullet that's going to accelerate the sales cycle. It's never one thing. You heard a lot of very practical, smart tips from Robbie and Sasha today. But if there's one thing you'd love for people to experiment with in the coming 30 days, maybe Robbie put you on the spot, what's the one thing you would suggest? And I know it's not one silver bullet, but
yeah, I forgot what I said during the dry run now. But for me, it would be trial criteria. If you're not doing a trial criteria and you're not getting something back in return for your trial, start thinking about that. Quid pro quo your trials. They're high value access so you can use.
That's great. What's the one thing we should try?
If you haven't done it, I would look at your CTAs. I'd look at your emails. What I see a lot are emails being sent out without CTAs positioned appropriately or where they could get click-through rates. So look at your CTAs, make sure that they're optimized across the site on all of your activities because the chances are that it'll help with your click-through rates.
CTAs and trial criteria. I love it. Really good closing thoughts to give it a try. Okay, let's see. We have any questions there, Jamie, from our audience? I'm not seeing any. Well, let me just once again thank you both, Robbie and Sasha. Robbie, you have so much experience to share. We could consume multiple of these sessions, and we're going to have you back. We invite you back. But then I'm sure your son Noah would have filled many coloring books.
Yes.
Maybe we'll do a martini workshop here and there.
I would mind that.
And Sasha, thank you again. You always have very good tips and practical tips. So thank you. We'll have you both on again another time. And also I want to close with, we have another Aventi Live coming up. The next one is scheduled for August 4th. And this time is at 8 in the morning. And this time the topic has to do with social media campaigns. Both product marketing folks, actually even the sellers get involved sometimes in social media campaigns. And we're going to talk about a very specific client of ours, SAP. Every year there's a SAP Innovation Award. And Aventi Group is the company that provides a lot of the planning and support behind the scenes. And in this Innovation Award, we Aventi Group with our client, SAP, put on lots of social media campaigns. So we're going to share some best practices, some very good tips and tools and techniques that come from our experience here. We're going to share that out again on August 4th, 8 o'clock in the morning, California time. We hope you will come back there. Oh, sorry, looks like there's one more question here from our audience. Robbie, Sasha, if you have another minute.
Sure.
The question is, are there any pandemic special sales techniques that are prevailed nowadays that you'd like to suggest for a software sale to convert a serious prospect to a customer, especially after a software trial, something that's a pandemic-related sales technique. Okay, post-software trial. Any thoughts?
I mean, what comes to mind too is going back. If you're looking at pandemic, is going back and looking at what their environment looks like today. How has it changed from what they were used to doing, and being able to hit home how you can help them build that change. Like, how can you continue to help people adapt to this new world that we live in? The more we can root this into how we can help them versus how our software, how our features of our software is, I think you can help that one. I think more people just need to go back and lead with that empathy of where people are. I think people are emotionally frazzled right now, and if we want to continue to help people, we have to meet people where they are. So I think that's kind of my first immediate response to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things you can do potentially is give them come back with some type of offer, maybe. Again, going back to something like a shelter a home kit, or the what Malwarebytes is doing with the coloring book. Just an outreach of kind of going, hey, you downloaded a trial. This is, a gift that potentially, just to get that conversation going. I don't know that that's gonna really turn a prospect into a serious prospect into a customer, but it gets the conversation going. But I think going back to what Robbie was saying, empathy is pretty important, being able to provide a solution to their issues and being able to create that connection and that serious, that kind of relationship with them. I think that is pretty key.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think about too is if it's a funding issue, if they have a freeze on their funds, and that's part of the problem, they can't convert, maybe doing an extended paid trial that for a certain type of group, and kind of try to reach yourself, step ladder yourself into a deal might help you. It gives you some revenue up front, gives them the product they like and need. But maybe they just can't get the full funding unleashed yet. So maybe looking at if your company offers a paid trial situation or an extended trial for pay, that might be another option to help you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and another thing are proof of concept, or actually, again, assessments. Maybe you can do a free assessment for them. Maybe you can do a pilot for them. So what is it that can get them going from a trial to the next level, even if it isn't an immediate purchase?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to pick up on the trial comment. Post-trial is a pilot. I've seen across some of our clients, when you have a serious prospect, especially in pandemic situation now, work at home is a really big use case. People working at home, and how do they do that in a secure way? And I have seen some other clients of ours it's kind of going back to Robbie's comment, what can they afford? What can they say yes to? So sometimes it's a departmental purchase. It's not a big enterprise-wide purchase. And they've done the software trial. They like the product. They want to buy. They may not be able to buy the whole thing, the whole enchilada. Could they buy one department, one geography, one work group, if you will, and get a PO going just for that one thing? Because if you got a serious customer who spent the time to do a trial and they're in, help them get to yes, or help them capture what they can say yes to.
And if this is a seller who's asking the question, work with your management team about maybe being able to extend that as a holdover for yourself. So I know a lot of sellers' concerns is, hey, if I just sold this unit, or hey, I just sold to this geo, I'm going to lose the bigger sale because I can only sell to this thing for 30 days after a sale. So if that's a concern of yours, always ask your management team if you can keep that account as a holdover, so that you can realize the full value of the work that you've done with that organization.
Mm-hmm. The old land and expand strategy, huh?
Right.
In the door.
It's a little different now, because land and expand, back in you would make the initial sale and you try to go sell new products or to new divisions. But in this situation, it's just a lack of the funding, or lack of the uncertainty of what's going to happen. And a lot of new business sellers in particular are getting penalized from that, because they're seeing these smaller deals come through, and then somebody else who comes in and does a land and expand in the olden days are getting the bigger deal, because by that point the funding's been freed up, and the new business seller loses a good portion of commission. So I understand if that's the motivation of the question. I understand where that was coming from.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely a seller from what I can tell. Yeah, good tips there, Robbie. Something else to add? Were you about to say something?
No, I think that's about it. I think Robbie made very good points there. It's essentially to get them to the next level from the trial to what can you offer to get them there, right?
Right. Yeah, I know when I was a sales manager, I used to tell my reps when they come to me, what can they do? Tell me what they can do. And then you always come back with something creative. It's like, okay, all right, we got a deal. Let's do it.
Exactly.
All right. Well, listen, guys, I'm not seeing any more questions here, and we're at the top of the hour. So I want to thank you both sincerely. You've got terrific comments. For those of you who attended a little bit late, this is a recorded session, so you can just come back to Facebook, refresh that page, and you'll see the full recorded session. Heartfelt thanks to you, Robbie and Sasha. Guys, be healthy, safe, well, and yeah, much success.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Take care, everyone.
Bye.